Not sure what episode this is number-wise, but it's another one.
A lot of them.
A lot of them. This thing's getting some momentum. We're enjoying it, and it keeps going.
This is fun. I like this part. Yes.
Digging deeper, and now it's Robert and Brandon. Every week's a little bit, probably for the people watching, who's going to be on?
Who's going to be on? There's a suspense to it all.
Yes.
So,
but everybody's excited when it's Robert.
But this is my first time that I get to actually sit across the table from you, stare into your eyes.
It's just a whole other level of intimacy.
This feels intimate. Very intimate.
We've got to actually do the podcast. We can't just get lost in each other's eyes, okay?
I'll try my best. Those baby blues. But, well, Brandon, let's just jump right in because yesterday you jumped right into Acts chapter 18, not 19, but 18, the first 11 verses. And you started out and you kind of read through the text and then you stopped on one section, this idea of do not fear.
Yeah.
And then you pointed out and said Paul likely needed to hear these words because he was
afraid.
Yeah. Now, those words jumped out on you, and I saw that you made that connection with Paul, so I want to make the same connection with you. Are there things that you're dealing with, fear-based, things that you're afraid of right now, things that you're kind of feeling hesitation or even some, I don't know, things that you're dealing with as well? Share some of those.
Well, I'm fearful that you're not feeling the same as I am as we look at each other's eyes right now.
I am.
No, this is getting out of hand. I do have fear. I try not to let it consume me, but I think the things that right now that I find greatest worry in are very similar to, I would presume, a majority of people feel in general. The state of our country in terms of our inability to get along with one another, the deep divides of partisan politics that continues to wreak havoc on us. Inflation, especially, those of us here in California, our gas went up another 25 cents yesterday or whatever. And so there are economic fears, there are people-based fears. And what that then bleeds itself into for me is the congregation, the church here at Rise City. What does that mean for people's personal lives? What does that mean for their mental and emotional states? Financially, what does that mean for their households? But then also, people's finances also dictates what happens in the church financially.
Absolutely,
and so there's concerns there because we have a staff and we have things that we use money for, and that money comes from people. And if people are pinched and there's less margin, it's like, oh man. And so those are things that, keep me up at night sometimes.
How about on because I know that there's this pastoral fears. There's also these personal fears, like for you and your own family, things like that, or even just friendship. You kind of shared about your daughter having to deal with so many best friends moving away and things like that. What are some of your personal fears that you're experiencing, maybe in light of some of the big picture fears that we're all facing? What are some things personal for you?
I fear entering into relationships with people because I don't know how long they're going to stay here.
Yeah.
So that's hard. You see new people and you're you almost have this mindset, everybody's in the military, you're going to just be here for a couple years and then you have a new assignment somewhere else. And so there's fears relationally in that. I have fears just culturally, what is being advocated, and being a father of 4 young kids. I do have concerns as far as all the things that are so wishy-washy now that used to be more defined. As far as what's right, what's wrong, what's true, what's false, and just the blurred lines with all those things. I mean, you and I talked about yesterday, somehow in California, it was is this a real story? That there was an appellate court in California that upheld a case saying that a bumblebee is now a fish. And I was like, what?
4 species of bees are now fish.
I was how am I supposed to raise my kids in any environment that's teaching that bees are fish? We all know a bee is a bee and a fish is a fish. So anyway, that gives me trepidation about what world my kids are growing up in. And that's I think people can follow the line of logic there of if that's what's in that realm, then all these other things that are blurred. So I have fears as far as I love living here.
Yeah.
But I wonder for my kids, how in the world are my kids going to afford living here if inflation continues at the same rate over the course of X amount of years? So my wife and I have those conversations a lot. They're real fears, but we try not to let them dictate our actions.
Well, and there have been a good number of people and families that have moved to other places in the country or maybe the world. I don't know.
Shout out to all those listening, watching from, let's say, the States.
Idaho, Tennessee, South Carolina. I don't know. All over the place.
Yeah, I mean, they're everywhere.
Yeah.
They're everywhere. We are an incredible missionary church.
Which is amazing.
We send people out all the time.
Well, and you kind of talked actually about how one of the ways that God encouraged Paul was he brought people that were on mission alongside him. Yeah. And that way, that's my love language, man. Yeah. The idea of finding affinity and unity because there's commonality in the mission that we have. But the mission that we have is kind of a little bit of a transient mission. It's this idea of go therefore. Sometimes it's also remaining and things like that. How do you balance this idea, and how does someone know when it's time to go and when it's time to stay? I mean, it's all included in that mission. How would you advise someone in that too? Because there's a lot of people probably sitting in the church listening that were saying to themselves, well, what if God does call me to go here? And you did say, make sure there's purpose tied to that. You talked about meaningful purpose, but how would you counsel through that, whether someone's deciding, should I stay here or should I go?
I mean, I think it comes back to your why.
Okay.
I mean, I think that I would try to, in counseling, ask a lot of questions to get to the root of what's driving you to go somewhere else. And I think if there are godly anchors in your why, then I think then you probably have permission to go. Like I look at Micah 6:8. Micah 6:8 says, "And what does the Lord require of you, O man?" Is to, right? You know what it says?
Yeah, walk humbly, love mercy,
act justly, and walk humbly with your God, right? And I can do those things anywhere, right? I can walk humbly with God. I can show mercy. I can act justly. I can do those types of things anywhere. But the question is that why I'm going somewhere? And if I'm going somewhere in order to get away from something and to make things necessarily maybe easier for myself and my family, that can be good, because maybe there's an instinct within you saying like, I don't think this environment is the best for my children or what's most beneficial for my marriage right now. And in this environment, it's taking a toll on my marriage and I've got to go somewhere else. I think that's a godly anchor. I think, okay, that makes sense to me. Or I just feel like my faith right now is becoming very dull and just lukewarm. And I think a change is necessary. Okay, then great, go for it. Even economically, of feeling like I have a desire to potentially have margin so I can be even greater in my levels of generosity.
There's resources.
Then go. But if it's just, I don't like the politics, the people drive me nuts, the government's down my throat, wherever you go, that's what's going to happen eventually anyway. That's where it's going. Yeah. At least that's my assessment, because it just seems like you're going to find those types of trends in some form or fashion anywhere you go. And there'll be temporary moments of alleviation, but you're still going to have new problems wherever you go unless your why is really anchored in, I feel like, a God-sized vision and mission.
Good. And you felt like God spoke a word to you that was encouraging, this idea of paying more attention to the opportunity than you do the adversity. Is that how you said it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of, I think, what you're hinting at right now was this idea where adversity is going to be anywhere that you go. It's always going to be there, but there's also opportunity that we could really focus in on. It's this idea of being mission-minded, mission-focused as well. It helps you be optimistic when you are rooted in a meaningful purpose and you kind of have that mindset in play and in focus on that kind of stuff. What do you feel like is some of the big opportunities that maybe we're missing that's around us right here in San Diego?
Well, I feel like that a lot of people are just hurting.
Absolutely.
And there's brokenness that's kind of really just spilling out all over the place. And I believe we have the greatest source of hope and healing and the remedy for all of that in the good news of Jesus. And so the very message that I have founded and given my life to has an entire environment that it can take root in right now in a very palpable and real way. Because when things are going easy and when things are going, just as you'd hope they would go, sometimes that causes you not to have greater levels of desire or dependence or any of those types of things. But there's a vacuum now of like provision. There's a vacuum now of comfort and stability. And there's a vacuum now of even relational wholeness.
Yes.
And the gospel says, I got all that. So why would I leave in order to like say, what if the gospel bared root here and we'd actually see incredible amounts of fruit?
Man, I am so encouraged that you're encouraged in that because I'm getting all fired up now.
Yeah.
Because it's true. I know the last 24 months, 2.5 years, however long it's been, has been really difficult, but it's also been a huge opportunity. And I feel like as believers, we can look at this and say, man, it's like bad news all the time.
Yeah.
But oftentimes the biggest obstacle that keeps people from the good news, the absolute gospel good news, is good enough news. Mm-hmm. The reason why we're not willing to like rest securely in the solid rock, the firm foundation of Jesus Christ, is because we feel like the ground underneath us is okay.
Yeah.
And now you're talking about, you opened up your message yesterday, you were talking about earthquakes and shaky ground,
Yeah.
Destabilization. And as I was listening to that, I was like fired up about it. I know that you were kind of saying like, this is hard, and you're empathetic, and that's good. But at the same time,
I'm being a pastor, Robert.
Yeah, that's very good. I was like getting like kind of like excited inside of me because I was like, oh my goodness, maybe people will actually start to see how much they need Jesus, because the world, even if you feel stable, if you feel like you have security and it's without Jesus, it's a mirage. It's an illusion. The only stability, the only security that you can possibly have that's lasting and will be eternal is in Jesus Christ. And so as you were kind of going through that, I was already all fired up about it. And then you like went to your first point, which was, let's have a meaningful purpose. Like, let's really be our meaningful purpose. And then you said, let's get with people that are mission minded and have the same, mission mind as you and things like that. Now there's our mission in the sense of the Great Commission and a big mission that we all have as Christians. But there's also kind of this idea of personal mission, this idea of, man, this is my heartbeat. And you and Pete kind of talked about that on Digging Deeper last week, of this idea of how Rise City looks a lot like the things that you're passionate about, the things that you care about, the things that you're burdened over, and things like that. Describe that for us. What does the heartbeat of Brandon Grant really look like?
I don't know if I've ever been asked that question, at least in that form. What does my heartbeat look like?
But
My heartbeat is definitely for people to feel value, honor, and dignity. Like I don't know if there's any greater atrocity in my mind, at least on my values, when someone gets undermined, when someone feels less than, when someone is deemed insignificant, when dishonor is in place versus high esteem and respect for someone. I think there are people that are unbelievably challenging to me, just like anybody else, but they're still people. And, I told this story at church a long time ago, but I'll never forget when my dad was an auctioneer, and there was a guy at one of his sales that always would come and he just had that look. Like he looked like he was homeless. He wasn't, but he just didn't take care of himself and stuff like that. And he offered me a piece of gum. I was a senior in high school, and said, "Hey, a piece of gum." And when he handed me the gum, like his fingers were just filthy. And I was, I'm like 18-year-old, and I'm like, disgusting. But I didn't say it to him, but I was like, no thanks. I don't need your gum. And my dad came up, and my dad took the gum. The guy's name was Bub. And he goes, "Oh, hey, Bub, thanks." And he popped the gum in his mouth. My dad chewed it and said, "So glad you're here at this sale today." And when Bub left, my dad looked at me, and his words were, he goes, "He's human, right? He's a person, right?" And it was just like, yeah, he is, right? Like he's a person, right? And that has stuck with me. And so my heart is to feel like, how do we create environments where people feel like wherever they're at in life and the journey they're at, it's honored, it's dignified, it's valued. It doesn't, and even in saying those words, it doesn't mean it's accepted in the sense of like we are permissible to all lifestyles, but it's saying we want you to be here so then we can talk and we can get to know each other and we can journey together because all of us are in process. That's why we're journey minded as a church. That's a part of my heartbeat, is to meet people where they're at, and so then we can take steps to where God calls us to be.
Yeah.
And I'm walking new steps together. And you're walking new steps. And so my heartbeat is always for that. I want my kids, like the thing with my children, if my kids ever come home hurt because they've been bullied or because they've been cut out of something, like, man, that's where I have a visceral reaction. I just want to like go like scream at somebody.
Yeah.
And I feel that in our church, I feel that in the world. So
I think you're hitting at a thing that is really big in our culture right now, and it's this idea of identity. This really thing of like people feel devalued, or even like they'll hone in on one piece of who they are and they'll make that their entire identity and things like that. As a church, how do we make sure that we're proclaiming the truth that God provides, the truth, in people's lives in a way that starts to root their identity, and also honors them where they're at, and then helps them to the next step of really getting closer to where Jesus wants them?
Well, I think it's constantly coming back to, in our preaching, in our talking, in our interactions of talking about being made in the image of God, and how before we were any other identity that you can put on yourself, we were already deemed made in his image, and then he would call us either a son or a daughter, not based upon what we had done, what we had not done, any of those types of things. It starts in its purest form is, I am made in the image of God. I am a dearly loved son or daughter. And I think that has to be not just what we say at the very beginning, but we have to continue to talk about that all the time. I have to continue to remind myself that all the time, because there's all of these other alternative identities.
Yes.
And alternative doesn't have to be alternative lifestyle. It could be like, my identity is found in me being a good baseball player. My identity is found in me being a great musician. My identity is found in me, thinking I'm this or thinking I'm that. But there are all of these lesser alternative identities that are never supposed to be an identity, because our only identity is who Jesus Christ said we are, which are, we are made in his image. We are his dearly loved son or daughter. And I start there, and we have to continue to come back to there over and over again. Who I have sex with is not my identity. It's a choice, right? It could be even a preference, or say, I feel I'm wired that way, but it's not an identity piece. My job is not my identity. I'm not a pastor. That's my profession. That's right. And I have pastoral tendencies, but that's not who I am. Even I'm a father, yes, but that's not my primary identity. I'm a husband. I am first. I am first a child of God, not based upon my performance, not based upon my lack of performance, not based upon my preferences, what I like or don't like. And I'm his son, and there are daughters out there. Yeah. And I think that has got to be what we champion over and over again.
It's got to be. I think there's probably people listening to this right now that needed to hear that more than you know. Yeah. It sounds in some ways, it's kind of like this is the drum that we're beating all the time. But man,
think about how many other drums are getting beat all the time.
I was going to say, there's a bunch of drums right now, and cymbals and loud noises, and it seems like
they're
it's
fighting that, no, your identity is you're a Republican.
Yeah.
No, your identity is you're a Democrat. No, your identity is that you're pro-life. No, your identity is pro-choice. It's like, no, those are not identities.
No.
Those are camps that you're choosing a particular side on, but they do not define your humanity and who you are.
That's good.
So I get passionate about that. So there's my heartbeat coming out.
There it is. There it is. Well, and everything that you're talking about as far as those camps and things that you're distracted by, they can distract you from your mission. They can distract you from what's really important. And I think that sometimes, even as churches and Christians and, a Christian community, we can get distracted pretty quickly on all those different things.
Sure.
So thank you for sharing your heart on that, man.
Yeah.
Well, I want to close by asking you one last question and kind of taking a turn, because you taught on chapter 18, but up until that week, you were going to be teaching on chapter 19, I think. So tell us a little bit, what were you going to talk about in chapter 19?
The message was going to really focus in on Paul's time in Ephesus, the place he goes next after Corinth, and look at essentially this riot that breaks out when I think it's a silversmith's industry is kind of put in shambles because people are not buying near as many Artemis statues and all this kind of stuff because of their allegiance to now Jesus. And when that happens, it causes the silversmith to rally the town. There's a huge riot. And so I was going to look at idolatry, because generally the things that when they're taken away from us that elicit some type of reaction from us indicate what matters to us. And usually those things that are indicated that matter to us sometimes matter too much to us, which would then make it more of an idol, something that is supreme or ultimate over God himself. And so I was going to look at idolatry and look at how all of us have idols and how we still struggle with idolatry. And So I mean, it would have been a nice, friendly, soft, warm.
But it kind of connects to what you talked about a little bit.
Okay.
Because those distractions are what often move us off the mission or the place, the location, the people that God has called us to, because we start to value other things higher than themselves too.
Yeah, and I would say in today's world, because we are so information saturated,
we are.
One of the greatest forms of idolatry that we have is ideology.
Explain that a little bit.
Well, because now we do find our identity in our ideologies, right? And so what I believe about this, what I think about this, that forms who we are. And that is a lesser formation than what God says is you are formed in his image. And so based upon what we think and how others think, we put that at the highest level.
Absolutely.
And if that's the highest level, then that's idolatry. And so I think that in our world today, especially in the digital mediums where we have information at our fingertips all the time, we have to be very careful that we do not make our ideologies like supreme, our identities, because that's a form of idolatry.
And we have more access to share our opinions and listen to everybody else's opinions.
We can spread our idols to everybody.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we do. Yeah. And we do. If you open up Twitter, you will find out that we do. Yeah. Right? We definitely share our ideologies, our idols, and we make that front and center so often.
Yeah.
So frequently. So,
Hey, can I say one more thing?
I want you to.
It was going on in my head earlier. You were asking me about the decision as far as how do I move or do I stay? Do I go? All that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
A long time ago, and I think it was my economics class, which when I think about it, I don't know why it was in economics, but it was called the Pareto Principle. Some people refer to it as the 80-20 principle. Essentially saying that, some people say it like, 80% of the work is usually done by 20% of the people, or 80% of the profits is generated by 20% of the people, or whatever it is. It's like there's an 80-20 rule. And in terms of life and even marriage, I began to apply that principle to say, if I can, where I am at, find 80% of what I'm doing or the position that I'm in that actually is good, right? Having an optimistic viewpoint, and 20% that I don't, then I probably should stay. Because just by the Pareto principle, if I leave the 80 because of the 20, where I go to find the 20 probably is not going to have the 80. And I think that is so true in terms of marriage, right?
Wow.
So many people leave the 80 because 20% of the arguments or the stress or the frustrations. And then so they go to pursue the 80 somewhere else because they had this 20. And it's like, wait a minute, that you just when the reality is you don't have 100%. You're not going to have 100%. At times there's going to be deficits. There's going to be times where I still have discontent. I still am unsatisfied. I'm still frustrated. I still have margins that are getting pinched. Whatever the case may be, any marriage, any parenting situation, if it's all 100%, smooth sailing, things right, it's like, okay, then you're lying, right?
Yeah.
But if I realize that like a sweet spot, if I can find somewhere where I have 80% of the things that are good, and I look around me and I see the people, or I have the provision or whatever, I'm being challenged by the Lord, whatever it might be. I think the enemy who comes in to steal, kill, and destroy, and he's a big fat liar, says, ooh, look at the 20%. Look how terrible it is. And the enemy tries to inflate the 20% to feel like it's 80%. And so you bail, and then you have buyer's remorse later on.
Man, so much of temptation and sin is that.
Yeah.
Look at that one tree that God told you not to eat from, and the grass is greener on the other side.
They had like 99%, they had a whole garden. They could do like
that. Yes.
They got to do like nude boat cruises and all that kind of stuff. And they still chose to eat the apple. It's like, dude, why didn't you just get on a boat naked and go have a, love cruise or something like that?
Man.
I don't know where that's coming from.
I mean, honestly,
all the things that Adam and Eve gave up to eat an apple or a fruit.
I think that's convicting in a lot of ways, that oftentimes, I can look in my own life and just be vulnerable. Oftentimes my distraction starts with my discontent.
Yeah.
A lot of times my distraction where I start to go towards other things and bail too soon, or start looking for things in other places, or think the grass is greener on the other side type of thing. It's because I'm finding discontentment with wherever, whatever, whoever.
And generally your discontentment's sitting in the 20%.
And it usually is. Yeah. And when you look at that, you realize, am I maximizing what God has given me where I'm at and with who I'm at? and how can I continue to maximize that and honor God through that? So really good word.
Yeah.
So,
what do you already possess that God has given you versus what you feel like you don't possess and don't have?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And coming back to my dad, he used to say, is that a need or is that a want?
Yeah, need or want.
And likely your needs, your 80 is met. So don't go chase the 20% of wants, because you might have that buyer's remorse.
Well, awesome.
So,
well, awesome. What a great conversation, Brandon. I'm challenged by it. So,
well, you inspire me.
And
You're
encouraged by it.
So it's good.
I do get fired up about it. So cool. I love being on mission with you. So
me too.
Thank you. I've really grown to love our friendship and things like that. So now we are staring into each other's eyes.
That because we're staring into each other's eyes. That's why I always say that, man. We like finish each other's sentences.
You know. So.
Okay.
All right.
Robert and I are going to go on our own little love boat cruise now, I guess.
It's a bromance. But anyway, no, it's all funny. But thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you next time on Digging Deeper.